Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Behind the Green Screen. As you can see, there's no green screen behind me. Happy St. Patty's Day. I know I'm not wearing anything green only because I look hideous in Kelly green, just absolutely dreadful. So I'm not even going to wear that color. All right. I'm not going to disgrace the color nor myself. All right. So, in my last episode, which I talked about my summer reading list of 1999. I said that I was going to introduce you to some of the mystery books in my personal library and sort of give you backstory on how I really got into mystery books. All right. So I have my list of books here. And I'm gonna start my story by telling you how I got into mysteries, and then I'll go through my list of mystery writers that I like. So picture it. It's 1980, and we have me, my single mom, and my baby brother, who is literally a baby at that time. We're living in Queens now. We just moved from Brooklyn to Queens. My mom was pregnant with my brother, and then once we settled in Queens, that's when she gave birth. So it's 1980, and there's this new thing that's happening called Home Box Office. Yes, HBO started in 1980, and it was just the one channel. You got a special box, and basically they ran wires to the box. Now, they must have been offering, like, it must have been for free or it must have been dirt cheap, like $20, because I can't see my single mother mom, single mother mom. I can't see my single mom splurging on something like this. It must have been free. They must have said, go ahead and try it. We'll run the wires. Nothing, you won't have to pay for anything. And I think that's what happened. Otherwise, my mother would not have taken it. Okay. Because that's an expense that she just could not carry. So, in my mom's bedroom are two closets. They're on opposite ends of the room, and they ran wires from the closet into the apartment. Wherever they ran the wires from the roof, it must have come down through everybody's closets, because that's how the wires ran, and they're like that to this day. So you can only keep the TV in one location right next to where the wires ran. So it was during the summer, I think, and I started watching. I would go into my mom's room and I would start watching HBO. Now, remember, HBO is just now starting out, it's home box office. So they had a very limited inventory of stuff that they were broadcasting. So you basically saw stuff on repeat, a lot of stuff on repeat. And one of the things that I saw on repeat was Evil Under the Sun, Agatha Christie's Evil Under the Sun. And that movie came out 1978, 1979, and it starred Peter Ustinov, Maggie Smith. You know who Maggie Smith is. May she rest in peace. And Diana Rigg. You know who she is. May she rest in peace. You may not know Peter Ustinov unless you're really like from my generation and you grew up seeing him in the Muppet Show, but that's another discussion. Anywho, so I watched this movie on repeat, as a matter of fact, I bought it. It's available on streaming, and I bought it just because it's such a great memory for me, right? So that's how it got me into Agatha Christie, and so I started reading her books, but I can't remember. I think I didn't really start reading them until I was in high school, and I just devoured them. They were great. I used to huddle up under the covers, especially during the winter, and just immerse myself into the novel to the point that I would jump at certain points in the book. That's how deep I was in the novel or in the novels. So anytime I would get a little bit of money, a little bit of chump change, I would take myself to, it was B. Dalton's at the time before it came Walden Books, I think. Yeah, it was B. Dalton's. And it was where we were in Queens. We were near the Queens Center Mall. and the bookstore was like right across the street. And so whenever I got my little bit of chump change, I would make a beeline to B Dalton and buy an Agatha Christie book. So you can see how old these are. And no, I did not buy them used. That's how old I've had them. And I should know better. Let me pull it from the other side. So here is one of the books that I bought very many moons ago. And the fact that I still have it with me should let you know how important these books really were to me, because they boosted my vocabulary like trillion times over. And it got me into trying to figure out stuff like doing mysteries and whatnot. That really just, it fascinated me. How do they come to that conclusion? So, this book, The ABC Murders, is one of my two favorite Agatha Christie novels. The other one is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, because that will drop your jaw. You hear me? That will drop your jaw. I'm not going to say a word. Go buy the book used. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, one of Agatha Christie's best. I'm saying the best. Okay, next to Curtain, which was her last in the series of the Hercule Poirot. And that's what this is. I can never pronounce the name. Hercule Poirot. As though you're about to bestow a kiss. That's from that was from the movie. That was from the movie Evil Under the Sun. All right. So Agatha Christie, in case you're not aware, Agatha Christie wrote these series of novels. She had two different detectives, two different series running. One was the Miss Marple series, which was about this little old spinster who lived in this little village called St. Mary Mead. And she somehow manages to solve these mysteries based on her life in this small village. Like, she can relate anything to something that happened at St. Mary Mead. So that's one line of detective mysteries. And then Hercule Poirot is the other line of detective mysteries, in which he's this obnoxious Belgian detective who, I don't know the specifics. I can't remember the specifics, but he becomes a refugee after World War One, and he decides to make England his home. He's like, I don't know if he was kicked out or whatever, but he's just very arrogant. He used to be a police detective in Belgium before the war. And, he just comes in and he figures it all out. He uses inductive and deductive reasoning. And that's what's so great about reading mysteries, is because you do learn about inductive and deductive reasoning. And you've heard of Sherlock Holmes and deductive reasoning, my dear Watson. Well, it's also inductive. Now, I'm not going to get in the specifics of inductive versus deductive reasoning. That's a lecture, and I'm not here to lecture you. So if you want to know what these two things are, look them up for yourself. But yeah, so that's why I love Agatha Christie so much, because it introduced me to that world of inductive and deductive reasoning, to mysteries, and also to it also introduced me to a wonderful new vocabulary. It really, like, I think a lot of the grammar and vocabulary that have stuck with me over time has come from reading Agatha Christie, right? All right. So the next one I'm going to talk about, yeah, I'll talk about her. Oh, and this was another one. Like, I have going back to Agatha Christie, I have a whole bunch of these um these paperback books that I bought when I was a teenager. As a matter of fact, they're right behind Paddington. You can see Paddington behind him. There's a whole bunch of Agatha Christie's, the same paperbacks that I bought over 30 years ago. All right, so the next one I'm going to talk about is, I discovered this author through audiobooks. And let me tell you a story about that. So I think There was a period in which I wasn't really reading all that much because life got in the way. I was dealing with 2 kids, I was, working full time, I was trying to go to school part time, and so reading for pleasure just it was one of those things where it was a guilty grab. Meanwhile, I'm still buying books, but I'm not reading them, or if I'm reading them, it's taking me forever to do so. But 2003, I really started going back to reading just for the joy of it again because, I was hired as an administrative assistant by my alma mater, Eastern Connecticut State University, and, I had to commute because I was living, like, 35 it was a 35-minute commute from my home. And, even though I had CDs and I love playing my music, it gets pretty old after a while and you want something new. So I don't know what possessed me, I don't know, but, Eastern Connecticut State University, is in a little town called Willimantic in Windham County, and, it's, fairly it's not a huge sprawling campus, but it's big enough, and Main Street is not too far away from the campus. You could walk to Main Street, and on Main Street is the Willimantic Public Library. I firmly believe that all libraries should be on a main street in a town. That's my take because it's just one of those things. You find everything that you need on a main street, and that should be a public library. But I digress. So I don't know what possessed me, but I decided to go in and get a library card. And because I saw their audiobooks and I said, "Oh, I might wanna try that on my commute," because, I never listened to audiobooks before. So this was something new, and, one of the first audiobooks that I picked is of this author. Now, I wanna preface this introduction to this author by saying the audiobooks is what hooked me, but the writing is what kept me. The way she tells the story, the way she takes you to places that you will probably never get to see. She knows how to set the scene. She knows how to take you to wherever she's taking you to. All right. So here's the book, Mrs. Polyfax and the Whirling Dervish. The reason why I'm holding this one up, I've read all the ones in the series because it's a series of books. But the reason why I'm holding this one up is because it's my absolute favorite. And of all the books that I reread, very few of them, but this is one of the few in which I reread as much as I can because I enjoy it so. It takes place in Morocco. So she takes you through the country. She just sets the scene so wonderful. I think Dorothy Gilman, who is the author of the Mrs. Polifax series, I think she was a traveler. And I think she took all the stuff that she learned from her travel and sort of integrated it into these mystery books. And so let me tell you about Mrs. Polifax and why I think that this is the dopest mystery series around. All right. And I'm just saying this as a Agatha Christie fan. All right. So here's the premise of the series. There's this little old lady called Mrs. Emily Polifax, and she is a widow. And this widow is having like an existential crisis. Her kids are grown, moved away, but for a long time now, it's not like she's suffering from empty nest. Her kids have been away for a while. They're married, they have children of their own, and she feels just like life has no meaning or purpose. And she's kind of considering you know, like 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 taking herself out, like she doesn't want to live anymore. And so I don't know what gets in her head, something gets into her head, and she says, "You know what? I wanna be a spy. I wanna be a spy for the CIA." So she, Mrs. Emily Polifax of New Brunswick, New Jersey, marches herself into a CIA office, and this is the book, this is not something that actually happened, this is the series. Mrs. Emily Polifax marches herself into a CIA office and says, "I want to speak to someone about a job. I would like to be a spy. I think I can be useful." Just like that. Now they think she's a nutcase, naturally, but then there's this man named Carstairs, and he's from the old spy days, like the OSS days, the good old, you know, na 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 na, those type of days, right? And he says, "Wait a minute, hold on a second. We can use her." And they do. They're like, "We got this operative that's here, and we need to get our man out, and we need someone innocent and unassuming like yourself, an older woman with your hats, because she loved to wear hats. You're perfect. You're perfect." And so they send her undercover as this matronly old woman, and she manages to get this operative out of, I think her first assignment was Albania. She gets injured in the process too, right? So with each book, you're in a different country. So you're in China. She's been in Mexico, Morocco, which is where the Whirling Dervish takes place. It takes place in Morocco, and I love this book so much because um, I didn't know what a whirling dervish was until I read this book. I knew it had something to do with mysticism, but I wasn't exactly sure why. And you've all seen videos of whirling dervishes. But this book explains what the purpose of whirling means. And it's quite lovely. And this book also has one of my favorite proverbs, I guess, or yeah, I guess you could call it a proverb or a saying. And it's an old it's an old Arabic saying, and it's trust in Allah, but tether your camel. A more Americanized version of that or English version of that is trust in God, but lock your car door. Okay. So, so you can see that I bought this book used. It used to belong to a library. Who didn't mean to do that. Used to belong to a library. I firmly believe in buying used books as much as possible, unless the newer version is cheaper than the old version, and than an older. And it does happen, believe it or not. There's sometimes in which the new version is cheaper than a used book. I'm trying to understand that, but there it is. So, but I do try to get them used as much as possible. And that's how I got this one as a library book. Now, regarding the audiobooks are dope as hell. And the reason why they're so dope is because of the narrator. She is this actress called Barbara Rosenblatt. And if you want to see what Barbara Rosenblatt looks like, you can go watch, I think she's in the first and second seasons of Orange is the New Black. She's one of the inmates in there. I can't remember the name of her character, but she is an excellent narrator, excellent voiceover. Like for the Mrs. Polyfax series, because it takes place in different countries. So I forgot, she's also been in Africa. And I want to say it's Botswana or a country like Botswana. But Barbara Rosenblatt gets all the accents. So if it's in China, she will talk, even man or woman, she's excellent at that. You are never confused about whether a man or a woman is speaking. And she has crafted a voice for Mrs. Polyfax that it sticks in my head as the only voice that I know as Mrs. Polyfax. Now, they did try to turn this into a movie. They did turn it into a movie. There was a film adaptation that was in the 70s, and it was with Rosalind Russell as Mrs. Polyfax. If you don't know who Rosalind Russell is, she is an actress from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. My favorite thing that I've seen her in is Mame, not the one with Lucille Ball, not that version. She was in the original film version of that from the 60s, Rosalind Russell, and she plays Mrs. Polyfax in the movie. I don't think the movie was very successful because there wasn't another one that came after it. So I don't know. I watched it because it is available for streaming. I wasn't very impressed by it. It wasn't how I envisioned Mrs. Polyfax. Mrs. Polyfax is just very unassuming, um, just this little old lady that looks like someone's great aunt with her hats. And Rosalind Russell, she's not a little old lady. She's very, if you've ever seen her in Mame and she talks a mile a minute. I don't think it was good casting. Let's put it that way. I don't think it was great casting. So there's that. So yes, Mrs. Polyfax series by Dorothy Gilman, married name Dorothy Gilman Butters. There you go. Okay, so I don't remember how I. Oh yeah, here's another one. Dorothy Gilman, A Poem for Mrs. Polyfax. I think this one takes place in Switzerland. I think I remember this one. Yes, I remember this one. Yeah, this takes place in Switzerland. This was a good one. Okay. So I don't remember how I wait, no, let me back up. Let me back up. I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna do this one because this is I was listening to audiobooks left and right, but of course they didn't have like, a whole lot for the Mrs. Polyfax series. So I was like, you know what? I'm on this roll. I'm really enjoying listening to books while I'm driving. And let me tell you something. Um, Listening and driving can be dangerous, right? Because if you're not paying attention, woof. But I managed to after doing it for so long, I can now drive and listen to an audiobook and not know where I am or not know my surroundings or not know when to stop. That's how I can basically walk and chew gum at the same time. Hello, right? So as I'm listening to the Mrs. Polyfax series, I'm talking about it with a coworker of mine who devoured books just as much as I did. A matter of fact, she was a speed reader. I think she probably still is a speed reader. I think once a speed reader, always a speed reader, right? So as I'm talking to her about the Mrs. Polyfax series, she says, "Well, I have a series for you," and she starts running off and telling me the series, and I was like, "What? What?" But I was willing to give it a try, and just so happens that the library in Willimantic had the audiobooks for this series. Have you ever read Lillian Jackson Braun? All right, this is going to be oddly cut because these telemarketers are out of control and they will not leave me alone. It's to the point that I cuss them out now. I cuss them out. Seriously. I cuss them out. But all right, let me woosah. I'm with you now. All right, so I'm getting back to the subject. I'm listening to these audiobooks and I'm talking to my coworker, and as she as I'm sharing with her these audiobooks, she says, "Well, have you heard of these books?" And so, have you heard of Lillian Jackson Braun? She is okay. So, see, this is what happens when stupid telemarketer interrupts my train of thought. Okay, so Lillian Jackson Braun has these series of books, and they're basically the Cat Who mysteries. And it's just as the title suggests, they're the cat who the cat these cats solve these mysteries. So the protagonist is this former newspaper writer called Jim Quillerin. Everybody calls him Quill for short, as like Quill Pen. And so he lives in this little town that's 500 miles from everywhere. That's how it's described in the book. So you never know the name of you know the name of the town. I forget the name of the town. I want to say Frostbite Falls, but that's Bullwinkle, not the name of this town. But it's this little town, and you think like it's maybe Wisconsin or Michigan because they talk about the weather. It's so cold, and just certain descriptions make you think that this is a town that's maybe in one of those states. So Quill has these two Siamese cats called Coco and Yum Yum. And Coco and Yum Yum, they don't accompany him everywhere. No, that's not what happens. These Siamese cats, they never leave the house, but they give him clues that puts Quill on the right path to solving the mystery. It is so cute. It is I enjoyed these mysteries. And I especially enjoyed them because once my coworker told me about these series, the library happened to have the CDs of them. So I was listening to them, and what really got me hooked on the series again was the audiobook narrator for this series of books. His name is George Guidall, and he has a very folksy, homey, NPR type of all things considered type of voice. Um, it's sort of um, it sort of reminds me of the NPR program Lake Wobegon with Garrison Keeler, and that sort of sit down. Let me tell you the story about da 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 da. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like when I'm listening to the audiobooks. But it's a very great series. So there's the cat that blew the whistle and the cat that played post office. And I have a whole bunch of others over there behind the Barbie. And I also have a whole bunch of audiobooks that I bought when I was subscribing to a certain service um, called Audible. I just want you to know that I'm not getting paid to mention that service. I'm not getting paid. There are other places where you can get audiobooks. Your local library, for one. And I think even with some libraries now, they've gotten extremely high tech. And I think it's wonderful. But with some libraries, you can even rent audiobooks. You can take out an audiobook rent. You could take an audiobook out online and I think listen to it online, which I think is wonderful. I think it's great. It's absolutely wonderful. So, you don't have to go out and subscribe to anything. But there are cheaper alternatives to that service that I mentioned. There are other places that sell audiobooks. You'll have to download probably special software in order to listen to the file because I don't know how the file is downloaded. But there are other places and other alternatives to get audiobooks. And I really enjoy them. And the Cat Who Mysteries and as well as the Mrs. Polyfax series. They are perfect for those Sunday mornings where you don't want to watch anything, you want to read, but you don't want to go through, I don't know, you just want to sit back, get a cup of tea, and just sit and like listen. So I recommend those two series. Perfect for that. Now, this series of books, I cannot remember how I came across them. It must have been an article that I wrote, or not an article I wrote, an article I read. But here is another series of mysteries by MC Beaton. I think it's a she. She writes two series of books. This one, which is the Agatha Raisin series. This was the first one, I think, the Quiche of Death. And then she has another series of mysteries called the Hamish Macbeth. And I like these series. Of course, you can tell why I gravitated towards this series, Agatha. But the Agatha Raisin is not your Miss Marple type of character, right? She's this woman in her mid 40s, divorced. I think she's divorced or never married. I can't remember. But she is not your sweet elderly. No, she's quite the opposite. She's very abrupt. She can be rude in manner. She has all these complicated relationships. And I think she used to be in advertising, if I remember correctly. I think she had her own agency and she sold it and she went to go live in the country. And that's when she encounters her first murder, and she begins to just start solving them. So there's that. I do recommend either the Hamish Macbeth or the Agatha Raisin series. They're both very good. Now, this other recommendation from the same coworker that told me about the Cat Who mysteries, and I enjoy these immensely. They're funny as hell. Okay, think of them as a mix of comedy, romance, and mystery. Have you read Janet Ivanovich, or have you heard of her? She has these series of books. The main protagonist is this fast talking, slick, wannabe a bounty hunter, but she's a very bad bounty hunter. Her name is Stephanie Plum. She has a very complicated personal life because she has a thing for two guys. One he's this cop that kind of helps her out when she gets tangled up in these mysteries, and the other one is this, by the description, this hot Cuban bounty hunter that, by his description, I would love to meet someone like him. Oof. Mm. And she gets him going. He gets her going, right? And, sometimes she has an effect on him, but he has the advantage each and every time. So I do recommend these series of books. There's a wild cast of characters in each and every time, but there's like the main characters, her mother, who just wants her to get married and settle down. She has a sister, and who they don't always get along. She has this Grandma Mazer, who is like this pistol packing grandma who just she's a spitfire. She's a spitfire. And then there's her dad, who just basically he just goes along with the craziness. He's like furniture at this point in the household. No one listens to him. No, he just sits there and goes, eh. And Grandma Mazur is his mother. Yeah. So it's a very funny series, and she has the titles. When she first started out, I love the titles. Now, let me see if I can get this open, and I'll read off the title. So if you go to you want to borrow these books, go to the library, borrow them if you don't want to, or buy them used, whatever floats your boat. You don't have to buy them new. But do not start in the middle of the series, because you really have to start at the beginning to understand all these characters, because it's like a revolving play with each series, or which each book. So the first one is 1 for the money, 2 for the dough, 3 to get deadly, 4 to score, high five, hot 6, and 7 up. Right. And then it goes on from there. I don't know what number she's at, because I stopped reading at 11, I think, and I don't even remember. It's around here somewhere. It's one of a hard copy book. But yeah, and it takes place in Trenton, New Jersey, I think. Yeah. So this takes place in Trenton, New Jersey. So yeah, this is beach reading. All of these are beach reading. All right. Make no mistake about that. You could take any one of these to the beach and you'll be highly entertained as you hear the water swish, swish, swishing. Okay. All right. Now, this book I also found through audiobooks. Okay. Once I ran out of the Cat Who, and sometimes I would listen to them twice because I enjoyed them so much. But once I ran out of the Cat Who and the Mrs. Polyfax, I noticed that there was another series of mystery books that they had at the Willimantic Public Library. Dorothy L. Sayers. She came out around the same time as Agatha Christie, but she doesn't. She wasn't she wasn't all over the place like Agatha Christie was at the time. Like Agatha Christie, everywhere you turn, right? But she came out around the same time, and she didn't, she's good. She's in her own category. I do not want to like compare and contrast these writers because they're both good in their own right. They do it in their own way. But I didn't start reading um, Dorothy L. Sayers until again, since when I started listening to audiobooks. So this series of books, the main character is this very well-to-do aristocrat called Lord Peter Wimsey. And I think this takes place during the 30s. And Lord Peter Wimsey has more money than he knows what to do with. And he's bored, but he gets caught up in a mystery, and then that's sort of like his thing. It kind of reminds me of Nick and Nora Charles from Dashiell Hammett's The Thin Man. I talked about it in my last episode of Summer Reading Lists, Dashiell Hammett. And it sort of reminds me of Nick and Nora Charles. Like, they're these socialites that have more money than they know what to do with, and they just party and drink. And that's what Peter does. He does party and drink like all socialites do, but he also solves mysteries. And he's got a wicked sense of humor, right? And that's what I like. Really good sense of humor. So I do recommend Dorothy L. Sayers and the Lord Peter Wimsey series. Now, the next two books came about as I was doing my graduate school work. Okay, so let me explain graduate school. Normally, graduate school programs are 30 credits, right? Each course is worth 4 credits. And normally you can complete it in like 18 months or 16 months. The school determines how long the program is. Now, that's your regular schmegular graduate school program. Then there are the advanced graduate school programs in which you require 60 credits to graduate. So, like your MBA and my degree program, which is an MFA. So, my MFA, Master of Fine Arts, is one step above a regular schmegular graduate school program, but one step down from a PhD. It's in that weird middle. So, my program required 60 credits, just like a PhD program. I had to do an enrichment project, and I had to submit a full-length manuscript. And you have to work with 2 thesis advisors to get together your manuscript and make it so that it is practically publication ready, which means it needs to be formatted, the whole 9 yards. It needs to have a bibliography, it needs to have a proposal, all of that jazz needs to be part of your manuscript that you submit and gets accepted by the thesis board or the thesis committee. And so it's the same thing. We're going through the same thing as a PhD program. But with a PhD program, it's not longer, but you have these series of steps as you get close to, because they do a dissertation. And so with each part of their dissertation, they have to meet with a committee who basically tells them if they're on the right track or not, in addition to having a dissertation advisor, right? So with my program, I didn't get my thesis advisors, and this was the same for everybody. We don't get our thesis advisors until the um, uh, last year. The second year, the year that you're about to graduate, is when you're assigned your thesis advisors. You can choose, or they assign one, and then you work with your thesis advisor. So when I first entered graduate school, my goal was to be a better mystery writer because that's what I wanted to do. That's how much I liked it. So I had already started a rough draft of a mystery novel. And so to get into grad school, I took the first chapter of what I was writing and submitted it with my application, and that with my grades, which weren't crappy. I wasn't a crappy student, even though I was juggling all this stuff. I think the lowest I got was a C, and that's because I really didn't care for the class. I thought it was bullshit because I was an administrative assistant, and this class was about how to use Microsoft Word and Excel. And I was like, yo, I do this every day. And while I could have asked for a waiver, I didn't because I thought, oh, well, this is going to be an easy A, but I didn't. I underestimated my level of boredom. But in any event, so I got into graduate school. And so in my first semester, I started working on this manuscript that I brought in. But by the second semester, so many fingers had been in my manuscript that I didn't recognize it as mine. So I junked it. But before I junked it, I was researching other mystery writers and how they did it. So, because that's what graduate school is supposed to be about. Well, at least for a writing program in which you read others in your genre, other writers who've been successful in the genre that you want to enter in, and you examine their writing style, how they do it, and then you take that knowledge and you sort of incorporate it into your own writing to make your writing better, more tighter, more precise. And so this is what I was doing. I was researching other mystery writers. Now, I was trying to find other Black mystery writers, okay? Walter Mosley, everybody knows Walter Mosley, Devil with a Blue Dress On. There was a film adaptation for that book that starred Denzel Washington, okay? But, and there was another hard-boiled detective writer, Chester Grimes. And I think I read Chester Grimes. I'm trying to remember. But in researching mysteries, I found this one. Now, this writer is YT. And the writer is white, but the writer is writing about New Orleans in the 1800s. And this is a mystery. I know it says a free man of color, but this is a mystery. Now, what was so dope about this mystery, the protagonist is Benjamin January, and he is a free man of color, hence the title of the book. And so the author, the writer, she really researches New Orleans at that time. And let me tell you something. I verified this because I was like, I can't believe that this really actually happened, but it did. So in New Orleans, during the 1800s, there's a hodgepodge, there's a mix of different cultures. And so there's Spanish, you have French, you have Creole, you have Haiti, you have Africa, white, Scottish, Irish. You have all these mixes, all these cultures from all these different places. And so you will know that there was a lot of, especially in New Orleans, it seemed to be accepted that there was mixing between the races. All right. And so what would happen is that they would hold these balls, these cotillions, and primarily the cotillions were about, wow, okay, let me phrase this delicately. The cotillions featured these young women who were majority mulattoes, quadroons, octoroons, okay? Meaning these were mixed race women. The more beautiful they were, and the more white features they had, the better chance they had at finding a sponsor at these cotillions. So basically, these really rich white people would go to these cotillions, check out these women, and then if they liked one, they would basically say, I want to make a deal, have that woman as my mistress. This was a thing in New Orleans. So the premise of the book is that at one of these cotillions, there's a murder that takes place, and Benjamin January is in the middle of it because he was there. I think it says on the back that he was playing piano at one of these cotillions when a murder takes place. So I could not believe I learned so much from this book, historic wise. Historic wise, I learned a lot from this book. And I also learned about mulatto versus quadroon versus octoroon and what that all means. Like if you're an octoroon, you could pretty much find yourself a sugar daddy. And they would put you up, they would come and visit you, whatever. You were to be their concubine, their mistress, whatever. And then the mother would sort of negotiate the dowry and the conditions of said arrangement. Right? Just woof, woof. Horrible, horrible, horrible. But I did learn a lot in this book. And it was a good mystery too. It was a really good mystery. It was really like one of those like nail biters. So I do recommend this book. Now, the other one, now there's a third one that I have that was actually written by a Black mystery writer. And I can't find it. I have to find it. But she's a maid. She's a maid and she gets tangled up in a murder. I have to find the book. If I find the book, I will introduce it in a future episode. All right. But this next one came not through my research. I already knew because there was such a big deal about the series of books. And it was turned into a TV series, I think either on HBO. I'm pretty sure it was HBO or Stars, that it was a television series that starred Jill Scott, the singer, the R&B singer, as the protagonist. Yeah, Alexander McCall Smith, the number one ladies detective agency. I think it takes place in Botswana. I'm pretty sure it takes place in Botswana. And the protagonist's name is Precious Ramotsi. I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing that. And it was very interesting. And here's the sign. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah. So that's the sign that was put out in front when Precious established her agency, right? So there was a big deal about this, not only because it was something new and interesting and different, but because the writer is white, Scottish, and he's writing about a Black woman, just based on his personal experience or interactions with people from this country or this region. I'm trying to remember the details because it's been a minute. But it is an interesting series. I think Precious is an excellent character because she takes no BS from nobody. All right. And she's courageous enough to say, I want to change my life and this is what I want to do. Right. So that's what she does. So that's that book. Again, it's a series. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it. So to recap from this side. Alexander McCall Smith, the number one ladies detective agency. Barbara Hambly, a free man of color. Dorothy L. Sayers, Mysteries, Lord Peter Wimsey series. Janet Ivanovich and her series of books featuring Stephanie Plum. MC Beaton and her Agatha Raisin series, as well as her Hamish Macbeth series. Lillian Jackson Braun and the Cat Who series featuring James Jim Quillerin. Dorothy Gilman and the Mrs. Polyfax series, excellent as a book and as an audiobook. And of course, my gal, Agatha Christie. So I hope you have enjoyed this rundown of my favorite mystery writers, and I hope that I have given you some ideas for books that you might like to read on a rainy or, one of those Sunday mornings or Saturday mornings when you just want to chill. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I will see you for my next episode of Behind the Green Screen. And just to give you a hint, Winnie the Pooh. Talk to you later. It's crazy out there, so stay safe. All right. And remember, it's going to be all right. Talk to you soon.